The year was 1922. Before coming to power, Hitler stated, "When I come to power, my first and most important goal will be to annihilate the Jews." Furthermore, in his book Mein Kampf, My Struggle, while laying the foundations of Nazi ideology, Adolf Hitler put forward his anti-Semitic views, used hateful rhetoric against Jews, and characterized them as parasites throughout the book. The exclusion and expulsion of Jews from almost every society they entered is not unique to Hitler. It has occurred throughout history. All of this is rooted in incredible stories found in a specific book. Let me explain this from the very beginning. In 586 BC, Jerusalem and the kingdom of Judah to its south were invaded and destroyed by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II. With the Babylonian conquest, the first temple was destroyed, and the Jews were exiled from the region. If we ask why they were occupied, did this happen for no reason? Did the Babylonian king simply decide to invade out of nowhere? Certainly not. One of the most significant reasons was the prophets murdered during the period of the kingdom of Judah. I am not saying a prophet, but prophets. Particularly during the decline of the kingdom of Judah, prophets warned against the moral and religious corruption of society. They called for conscience and justice, but those warnings fell on deaf ears. Specifically, the prophet Zechariah, who called the king of Judah and his people to repentance, was, according to Jewish sources, stoned to death within the temple. Such examples demonstrate how deep the moral and religious decay was during the final period of the kingdom of Judah, showing that even prophets were affected by this situation. Yet, those who narrate this history often tell it as if everything happened for no reason, portraying Jews solely as a people who were constantly massacred, exiled, and oppressed throughout history. The concept of the chosen people. Today, Jews believe in a holy book called the Tanakh. The Torah is considered the most important section within this book. This is where the crucial point begins. Their scriptures state the following in Deuteronomy 14 verse 2, "For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. Out of all the peoples on the face of the earth, the Lord has chosen you to be his treasured possession." Another example is found in Exodus, Shemot, 19:5-6. "Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." If you examine the Torah, or rather, the altered Torah, you will see that many prophets are portrayed as impostors, and even Moses is depicted as a murderer before his prophethood. Because of this belief, Jews are perceived as seeing other nations as inferior, seeing no issue in killing them, taking possession of their families, or plundering their property. Some even claim they are already our slaves. In fact, there is a similar verse in the Holy Quran, but with a distinction. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 47 says, "O children of Israel, call to mind the favor which I bestowed upon you, and that I preferred you to all other nations of that time." At first glance, this might look like a verse granting superiority to Jews. Many people point to this verse and claim, "Your holy book also practices discrimination." Of course, there is an explanation for this, but there is no need for it. Another verse already explains the situation. Moses once said to his people, "O my people, remember Allah's favor upon you when he raised prophets among you, made you kings, and turned you into free people when you were once slaves. He gave you what he had not given to anyone else in the world." It is clearly understood here that Jews were not deemed superior to other people or regarded as a superior race. It simply describes the blessings they received, such as having prophets among them, being liberated from slavery, and receiving holy books. However, they disregarded all of these, caused corruption, and martyred prophets. Throughout history, Jews interpreted verses according to their own interests and made rulings based on them, and they continue to do so today. Looking at all of this, it is clear that there is no good intention involved. If you are Jewish, you may not have heard these things until now, but these are all facts. You can research and see for yourself. The origin of the name Israel and biblical narratives. Now, I will tell you about a strange event regarding the origin of the name Israel. According to belief, while prophet Jacob, was on his way to meet his brother Esau, whom he had fled from for years, a man stopped him and said, "You cannot pass through here without wrestling me."
They wrestled until morning, and prophet Jacob won.
It turns out the person he wrestled with was God. Because God was defeated by his own creation, he gave Jacob the name Israel, a combination of the words Isra, to struggle/strive, and El, God, meaning he who struggles with God.
This strange event is described in the Genesis section of the Torah.
This altered book, which lacks any logical consistency, is the sacred text they accept and believe in. It is a book that seriously describes a God being defeated by a helpless being he created.
If you think that's all, I have another example.
According to the book of Genesis, when prophet Abraham was heading to Egypt due to famine, he said to his wife, "I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me but let you live. Please say that you are my sister, so that they will treat me well for your sake and my life will be spared."
When they arrived in Egypt, Pharaoh noticed her beauty and indeed treated Abraham well. Because of her, she was taken into the palace.
In return, Abraham was given sheep, cattle, male and female donkeys, slaves, and camels. Then, the Lord inflicted terrible diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abraham's wife.
Thereupon, Pharaoh summoned Abraham and said, "What have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say, 'She is my sister,' so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." This is narrated in Genesis, chapter 12.
In their book, prophet Abraham is portrayed as someone who gave his wife to Pharaoh out of his own fears and condoned her marriage, essentially marketing her.
From the era of Jesus to the 20th century. Long years passed after the Babylonian exile. When the era of Jesus arrived, the Jews did not remain peaceful. Jewish religious leaders were disturbed by Jesus' teachings and his declaration of being the Messiah.
They set a trap for him in exchange for money and reported him to the
Roman Empire.
They claimed he was rebelling against Rome and inciting the people to revolt. Consequently, the Roman governor Pontius Pilate bowed to the pressure of Jewish leaders and the public, sentencing Jesus to crucifixion. Of course, the person who died was someone who resembled Jesus. The Quran clearly states that he did not die but was raised to Allah.
Regardless, this does not change the result. The Jews intended to cause the death of yet another prophet.
In the famous Last Supper painting, the person depicted in the front holding a bag of money is Judas Iscariot.
We see his betrayal in that painting.
Judas was a traitor who had infiltrated the apostles and was a tool of the Jewish religious leaders. He betrayed Jesus and revealed his location to the Romans for a mere 30 silver coins. In 66 AD, the Jews fought the Romans, lost the war, and were exiled. This was a major starting point for the Jewish diaspora, leading to great divisions among them. Many years later, during the time of Prophet Muhammad, while Medina was besieged during the Battle of the Trench, some of the Jewish tribes living there betrayed the Muslims and joined the enemy ranks.
However, the Muslim army won the war, and the Jewish tribes were exiled once again. The rise of Zionism and the State of Israel.
Moving to the 20th century, during the Ottoman period, Jews lived in prosperity. In the final years of the Ottoman Empire, the 1870s and 1880s, the idea of migrating to Israel and establishing a national homeland for Jews began to be discussed among European Jews. Theodor Herzl was at the forefront of this. In his book The Jewish State, he spoke of the Promised Land and stated that a Jewish state would one day be established in the Middle East. According to Ottoman records in 1878, the population consisted of 87% Muslims, 10% Christians, and 3% Jews. However, Jews now wanted to be a unified whole. Herzl believed that Jews should leave Europe, have their own state, and that this state must be around Jerusalem, where their ancestors once lived. At the Congress held in Basel on August 29, 1897, led by Herzl, the establishment of a Jewish state became an official goal. The flag of the State of Israel was introduced for the first time at this meeting. Ultimately, at the end of World War I, the Arab lands under Ottoman control were lost. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration was published through the initiative of Britain's Arthur Balfour. The declaration stated, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. A few months after Balfour's letter, the the British occupied Palestine, ending 400 years of Ottoman rule. At that time, Palestine was inhabited mostly by Muslims, with Christians and Jews as minorities. The idea of creating a Jewish presence in Palestine became known as Zionism. Many Jews in Europe initially saw this as a dream, asking, "Why should we go to the Middle East when we are comfortable here?" Funds were created to encourage Jewish migration, and lands were purchased in Palestine. But despite all efforts, only a small fraction of Jews were convinced to go until World War II. The Holocaust and the aftermath. The Nazis, with the help of collaborators, massacred millions of Jews, men, women, and children. Approximately 6 million Jews were erased from the world within a few years. This was called the Holocaust, known as Shoah in Hebrew, meaning catastrophe. Roughly 2/3 of the 9 million European Jews were killed, and the survivors were gradually forced to migrate to Palestine. One could say that, in a way, Hitler enabled the establishment of the State of Israel. There are even rumors that a ruthless plan was made with Hitler to drive Jews out of Europe because they couldn't be gathered for decades to establish a state. The plan was to put Jews on an irreversible path and leave them desperate. Hitler would spread such fear that they would feel unsafe anywhere in Europe. God was to be established, it was worth any cost. Indeed, after the Nazi massacres, a large portion of Jews sought refuge in Palestine, and interestingly, a Jewish state was established just a few years later. A year before the state was founded, Britain, which held the Palestinian region, was exhausted after the World War and decided to withdraw. That same year, the newly formed United Nations voted to partition Palestine. According to the plan, 55% of the country would be designated as a Jewish state. The Palestinian army was disbanded and disarmed. Just like the Ottoman Empire after the World War, the country was to be divided, but they were not as strong as the Turks. The UN essentially gave Zionist forces the green light to take over the region as they pleased, telling them they only needed to reduce the Palestinian population. What followed was horrific, as Arabs faced incredible oppression. Militia forces attacked the village of Deir Yassin in 1948. Details in UN reports describe this atrocity. 250 people, including women, men, and children, were massacred. Women and children were stripped, photographed, and then shot with automatic weapons. This massacre terrified many Palestinians, forcing them to flee before their turn came. It is said that similar massacres continued during that period. It was as if the Jews were taking revenge for the oppression the Germans had inflicted on them by targeting Palestinians, without sparing women, the elderly, or children. On May 14, Jews gathered in Tel Aviv and officially declared the establishment of the State of Israel. In conclusion, throughout history, many Jews have seen themselves as superior to others because of their beliefs, leading to acts of oppression, betrayal, and subsequent exiles. Today, they continue to oppress Palestine with this same belief system. You can be sure of this, as long as this belief system, where they alter the Torah for their own interests, does not change, this cycle will continue, and the war will not end until doomsday. Please follow me for similar topics and different content. See you soon, take care.